How far would someone go to build a full-sized Avatar gunship from scratch? This isn't a set piece, and it's not built by a studio crew. It's a full-sized replica gunship, imagined in Avatar, reimagined in a backyard. Every part is handmade. This is what happens when obsession meets craftsmanship and refuses to compromise. Before any cutting begins, Doan sketches everything by hand, marking out shapes, curves, and how each part will come together. The project will unfold in several stages. It will begin with shaping a foam core that forms the basic structure. After that, metal reinforcements will be added to ensure strength and durability. Once the frame is solid, accessories will be installed, and the entire build will be finished with a fresh coat of paint. Using a wire cutter, he slices through foam like butter, transforming blocks into clean, uniform panels. He transfers the design onto the foam with pencil strokes, clean lines that trace the gunship's silhouette. One slice at a time, the helicopter's skeleton begins to take shape. To reinforce the frame, Doan brings in metal, cutting long, thin strips using a circular cutter. These are bent to fit and then carefully pressed into place along the foam's length. He glues the strips in, then welds the metal together, combining the softness of foam with the strength of steel. The front hull is now locked in, solid, and built to last. The cockpit shell is built, but now it's time for detail. Doan layers in small foam parts, carving sharp edges for the windows, doors, and front frame. He cuts out sections of foam to shape the cockpit frame, carefully removing the excess. For the front doors, he adds real hinges, screwing them into the frame with a handheld drill. Then Doan slices out another foam panel and shapes it to fit snugly over the cockpit, adding thickness, weight, and that unmistakable layered look from the movie's design. On the sides, he adds fins and flaps. At the back, he cuts out a section of the frame to create the signature open compartment, then molds new foam to close off the tail. Nothing is wasted. Scraps from earlier cuts are reworked and glued into the tail structure. The glue sets. Doan trims away the extra foam with a sharp knife and then sands it smooth, turning rough blocks into a flowing aerodynamic tail. One by one, the contours lock into place, like assembling a Lego set made of styrofoam. He begins shaping a metal skeleton, measuring lengths, welding each piece with care, keeping it strong yet light enough to hold. The triangular shape is key. Doan welds metal bars along the length, placing vertical supports across the spine. It's balanced, reinforced, and built to slot perfectly into the rear. He tests the fit on the mainframe, checking alignment. Then, using the structure as a guide, he starts carving foam panels to match the tail's contours. Bit by bit, Doan builds up the outer body, stacking panels with glue and trimming excess with a sharp blade. With everything in place, he sands it smooth. He then moves on to a bridging piece, a custom-cut panel that connects the tail to the rear hull. Next come the flaps and rear wings. Doan begins with foam, slicing out the core components using a wire cutter for surgical precision. But to make them move, he returns to metalwork, installing pivot rods through custom holders built from foam, locking them in place with screws to create a real working joint. Once the mechanics are in, Doan hides the moving parts, layering on foam panels and welding together a V-shaped support for strength. The final step, crafting the flaps themselves. He carves, installs, and mounts them onto the tail's metal assembly. They move exactly as planned. Doan brings out the cockpit hull from earlier, carefully takes new measurements, and begins laying down the internal skeleton. A metal frame is secured on top, followed by a vertical metal stand, the spine that will carry the wings. Around this skeleton, he begins shaping the exterior. Every detail, no matter how small, is replicated. As the foam structure expands outward from the core, he shaves away the excess with clean, controlled slices, sanding it down to match the sleek curves of the original design. Now comes the propeller mechanism. One by one, Doan arranges styrofoam segments around the circular base, forming a massive ring that mirrors the rotor housing of the real aircraft. With his cutter and compass tool, he trims the edges to precision, ensuring the propeller won't strike anything during its rotation. He cuts along the outer edges with a steady hand, smoothing each frame until the curves are seamless. Then Doan stacks an additional styrofoam ring on top. Using his compass once again, he marks out the connection points, then welds together a custom support arm designed to hold the propellers firmly in place. A narrow slit is carved into the top of the circular styrofoam, and the welded support arm is inserted, bolted down with hinges for extra hold. When he finally places the propeller assembly onto the body of the helicopter, it fits like a puzzle piece. Now it's time to bring the heart of the helicopter to life, the spinning propeller blades. Doan starts with the blades themselves, cutting each one from styrofoam using a wire cutter for sharp, clean edges. Then, to give the blades strength and realism, he mixes up a batch of epoxy and begins the painstaking process of coating each blade in fiberglass. Layer after layer, Doan applies the resin-soaked fabric, creating a hardened shell that transforms fragile foam into something that looks machine-built. Next comes the motor assembly. On the metal frame prepared earlier, he installs a small motor and capacitor, carefully wiring it along the base. To house and secure it, Doan builds two thick circular styrofoam discs, stacking them around the motor like a sandwich. A quick test, and the motor hums to life. He then attaches 3 of the fiberglass-coated blades to a foam cylinder and installs it directly onto the rotating shaft. With the mechanisms complete, he turns to finishing touches. The exposed metal frame inside each rotor is hidden beneath hollow styrofoam shells, cut and fitted to cover everything neatly. Smaller detailing follows, with more custom-cut foam pieces used to fill in the fine edges and seams around the wings and rotor mounts. The raw skeleton is gone. What remains is a machine that looks like it flew straight out of Avatar. With the propellers complete, Doan shifts focus back to the main hull. Still unassembled, more foam pieces are added to the exterior, glued down and carved with the same careful precision. He uses his wire cutter to trace sharp contours, then smooths each edge with sandpaper, slowly transforming flat panels into a curved, lifelike surface. Layer by layer, the design begins to pop. But beauty needs backbone. Doan begins by measuring a thick metal rod and slicing it into smaller sections. These are welded together to form a strong, rigid frame for the floor of the hull, a necessity, since styrofoam alone could never bear the weight. Smaller metal pieces are then laid across the frame to reinforce it further, creating a true foundation within the foam shell. Once the floor frame is ready, he returns to the foam body and carefully cuts out the base using his wire cutter. The metal frame is then fitted inside. A second, smaller frame is added on top to secure everything tightly. Using metal wires, Doan binds the hull structure together and starts reinforcing every inch from the inside out. Thick sheets of metal are brought in, cut and bent manually to form curved support brackets. These brackets are welded along both sides of the hull's interior, anchoring directly to the floor frame below and the wing mount frame above. Finally, he uses a metal wire to shape the front of the helicopter's roof. Then, trimming away excess styrofoam, he fits everything cleanly together. With the skeleton in place, it's time to bring the interior to life. Large panels are shaped and glued in to cover the walls, the floor, and even the tail section, sealing everything from view and giving the space a seamless, finished appearance. The floor gaps between each frame are filled in with foam, smoothed out to match the rest of the interior. From front to back, every visible surface is now clean, uniform, and camera-ready. But a cockpit needs more than walls. It needs somewhere to sit. Back at the work table, the builder begins crafting the seats, not by buying them, but by shaping every piece by hand. Then he takes a knife and carves smooth contours into the foam, sculpting armrests, backrests, and curves that mirror real aviation seats. And as always, strength meets style. Each seat gets its own welded metal frame inside, carefully fit and fixed into place. 4 fully formed, hyper-detailed seats are assembled, all foam on the surface, all structure beneath. Now for what holds the entire machine up, the landing gear. Doan brings out a thick metal rod and begins cutting into it with a circular saw. With deliberate pressure, he bends it just slightly at both ends, enough to distribute weight but still look sleek. Smaller rods are cut, bent, and welded into position to form a stable stand beneath the helicopter. Once the shape is locked in, he covers the metal base with custom-cut styrofoam shells, blending the supports into the body seamlessly. A little sanding, a little shaping, and now the landing gear looks as natural as the hull itself. With the body built and the structure solid, it's time to add firepower. The missiles come first. Using a mold, he forms rounded nose cones, each one dried, removed, and trimmed for a perfect fit. Once ready, Doan takes evenly cut plastic pipes and attaches the domed ends to make the full missile bodies. After a round of sanding, they look polished and precise. Then he moves on to the launchers. Small metal rods are welded into clean cuboid frames, the missile encasings. Another welded structure is built to mount these launchers directly onto the underside of the helicopter, anchoring them right above the stand. With the frames in place, he adds layers of padding. Thin slices of styrofoam are fit around each missile tube, holding the plastic missiles snug and steady inside. Once the fit is perfect, Doan pulls the missiles out and begins casing the entire launcher in styrofoam, panel by panel, until the whole system blends with the rest of the build. The result? A pair of launcher boxes with hollowed interiors, precise fittings, and a clean exterior finish. The launchers are mounted, the missiles slide back into place, and for the first time, the helicopter replica stands complete with armament. The cockpit fits like it should. The wings stretch wide, and from the spinning propellers to the missile bays below, every detail is locked into place. It's not just a replica anymore, it's a full-scale tribute, handcrafted to the very last bolt. Structurally, the replica is done, but it's not finished, not yet. So the builder begins disassembling the helicopter piece by piece, preparing it for the next phase, installing the accessories and painting the entire body. He pours just enough cement into a mixing bowl, then adds latex milk glue. The two are mixed thoroughly using a drill mixer until the paste is perfectly smooth. Starting with the main hull, Doan begins applying a thick gray coat, carefully working it across every surface from edge to edge to ensure full, even coverage. The coating isn't just for looks, it's a shield, a way to protect all that sculpted styrofoam underneath. The process is methodical. The tail, the flaps, the frame under the hull, all receive the same treatment, one layer, then another, until the surface is sealed and set. Once the cement coating dries, the transformation truly begins. He begins by applying fiberglass mat across the cabin's interior components. Once the fiberglass hardens, he spreads body filler across the panels to even out the texture. After the filler sets, he sands everything smooth. After that, Doan moves on to assembling the external surveillance camera. Carefully connecting all the parts, he assembles the device, then places the camera into its mount, making sure it's firmly secured. Once everything is in place, he attaches the entire setup to the nose of the helicopter. Next, Doan turns his attention to the audio system. He saws open the casing of the old speakers, splitting them into two halves. Then he installs new drivers into one section, replacing the old components to enhance the sound quality. After trying to start the engines using the control stick, the builder was dissatisfied with their power. After carefully dismantling several cordless drills, Doan salvages their motors to repurpose them as engines for the helicopter. He then meticulously attaches these motors to the rotor blades and connects them to the control stick. With everything in place, he attempts to start the helicopter again and is pleased to find that it performs much better this time. The painting phase begins. Doan starts with the smaller components, carefully coating each one. He begins with the seats, brushing on a vibrant iron yellow paint in smooth, even strokes. Step by step, the dull parts get a fresh look, and the build starts to take shape. Smaller details are painted in matte black, adding contrast, while some accessories are highlighted in a striking red. Red fins, red stripes, red markings that give it presence. The process takes hours, maybe days. With the paint job complete and the surfaces dry, the builder begins reassembling the propeller system. The internal mechanism is carefully refitted, and the blades, now hardened with layers of fiberglass and glossed with paint, are screwed securely into position. He slots them back into their frames and powers the motor. The propellers begin to spin, smooth, balanced, and precise. One by one, the completed components are carried outside. It's time for final assembly. The hull is hoisted and mounted back onto its metal stand. Every element from the missile pods to the floor frame is locked in place. The tail is attached and secured. The wings and propellers follow. Finally, the seats are installed, and the last small detailing pieces are glued and secured. Every bolt, every edge, every curve, perfectly aligned. Here's the helicopter he used as a reference, and here's how his version turned out in the end. The full-sized replica now stands completed, a helicopter built from foam, metal, and months of careful labor. It can't fly, but it was never meant to. This was a project born from admiration, a personal tribute to the iconic aircraft from Avatar. And now, it lives, not in the air, but in the world, as a monument to creativity, craft, and quiet obsession.